Hello everyone, what's up? Prince 15 here with another review of The Bad Batch. Today we're taking a look at The Harbinger and the grand return of the one, the only, Asajj Ventress. A long-standing Clone Wars character, another one making their much delayed return to Star Wars after a long time off the screens, and it's really, really cool to have her back. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the big thing in the episode is Ventress is back. We know this because of the trailer. They spoiled it in the trailer. I understand why they put it in the trailer, but it would have been just think about how wild it would have been if they had just not put her in the trailer and we don't know that she's coming, and then it's like, oh, whose ship is that? And then she just emerges from the shadows. Everyone would have been flipping out. It would have been cool. But I think I understand why they put her in the trailer and everything, because it got the conversation rolling about including her in the first place, which is kind of a big deal because at this point in the timeline, everyone assumed she was dead because in canon, she has died. For those of you unaware, she's kind of a character that Star Wars forgot for a long while. You know, it being 11 years since her last time being on screen in anything Star Wars, I think, because she was in season 5 of Clone Wars, and then like maybe she was in maybe they included her in like those like animated Star Wars kids shorts or whatever that people use to make anime intros for Star Wars. Like maybe she was included in some of those for like the dark side promos or whatever, but it's been 11 years since Ventress has actually appeared in anything on screen. But that wasn't the original intention. She was supposed to have a whole 10 episode arc split between like 2 or 3 more seasons of the Clone Wars, where we would explore more about her backstory, more of her as a person that's not just this psycho assassin for Dooku, and and this Night Sister. You're like, who is she when she's just on her own? It's like, what are her, what does she want out of life in the galaxy other than just revenge or to fight the Jedi or whatever? So these episodes, of course, never got produced because Clone Wars was canceled after the Disney buyout. And then, so then they took those scripts and they turned them into a book called Dark Disciple. It's a really good book. I've read the book, and it details, and it tells the story of what those episodes would have been. And then the book ends with her dying, saving Quinlan Vos from Count Dooku on Christophsis, of all places. It would have actually included the second Battle of Christophsis, which is an interesting thing that's just kind of glossed over. I think, well, I mean, it is canon because it's in this book, but it's like, it's like, oh yeah, there's a second battle there. We don't talk about it, but there's a second battle there. So she dies, kind of redeeming herself, and becoming, not really becoming a Jedi, but it's like coming back to the light and being a heroic figure after saving Quinlan Vos. And she was buried on Dathomir, which I think is going to play an important part of how she comes back. It's Dathomir, it's the Night Sisters, they're witches, they've got all their dark magics and stuff. So it's not going to be difficult to bring her back. I feel like it's the justification for bringing her back because it was a good send off for her. But and here's the thing though about bringing her back, where I've been on the fence about it, is that, okay, hey, they're bringing her back. That's really cool. It's nice to see her again after all this time. But at the same time, it's also, well, but she had such a good send off in the book. But that was in the book. And I think at this point, even though they say everything is canon, and for the most part they do stay true to that, there is the occasion where if they see the opportunity, and we've discussed this before, if you've watched any of my reviews for anything Star Wars, we've discussed this before, where if they see an opportunity to do something on screen, they will happily retcon a book or a comic because they're going to actually be able to do it on screen, and they see on screen as being the main medium of Star Wars, which it is. I'm going to wager a guess that most of the people that watch engage with Star Wars content are going to be watching the movies or the TV shows, and after that, you're going to get less and less people that enjoy the comics or the books or the games. So I get it. I understand that, even if as a nerd who does engage in all of it, books and novel, books and comics and games and TV shows and movies alike, it is kind of I see why you did this, but that one thing was cool. Now you've undone it. So I get it. So I get it, but I still don't always agree with it. So it's kind of a prime example with the Bad Batch with this show is when they retconned the canon comic books. Like, they changed the color of the clone's armor. They changed the way the location looked. They inserted the Bad Batch into this. Now, there's nothing to say that like the whole rest of that comic doesn't still happen exactly as it does. They just put the Bad Batch there in there at the very beginning of Kanan's story, but they kind of retconned the very very beginning like that. So the Bad Batch has done this before. This writing team has done that before. We know Dave Filoni's done that before, and he's credited as the creator of this show. He's not the main writer of it. They've got other writers and a supervising director for that. But I'm as the creator, the executive producer, whatever, I'm sure that he is checking in with them all the time and giving notes and stuff like that, and guiding them along as George Lucas once did for him. So I am curious to where they think the benefit is to reviving this character after a very well-received send-off from the fandom for her, because I haven't seen anyone that has dissed or disliked, let's put it that way, that has disliked or disagreed with the ending of Dark Disciple. Pretty much everyone's gone that's read the book has gone, that was a well-written and fitting send-off for this character. And now they've kind of brought her back from limbo after having a good send-off. So I am very curious what they think their justifiable end goal for this is to justify bringing the character back. Because this is certainly not the first time Star Wars has done this. But Darth Maul being a prime example of this character that was so obviously clearly dead, and then they just kind of, he's alive now, he's just alive now, and then that's basically all they say about it, just justify it. But it's gone on to, the bringing the character back from the dead is one of the best things that happened to that character, because Maul is one of the best Star Wars characters of all time. Less so a successful case for, say, Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker, just with that execution stuff. And of course, here we have Bad Batch and The Mandalorian and all this other media that is now, it seems like it's not its sole purpose, but one of its main reasons for existing on top of just being a cool show is also to justify this plot point in the final Star Wars movie. Except it's not going to be the final Star Wars movie, because there's going to be a movie starring Rey that happens after Episode 9. So yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be stories that take place way after that and stuff as well, where it's just going to be all new characters and any legacy characters are not even going to be mentioned, and it's going to be like a basically almost a reboot. It just happens after everything we already know. And honestly, I kind of can't wait for that eventuality. It's going to be probably like another decade plus before we get anything like that, I'm sure. But it's coming. It's coming eventually, and I'm kind of excited for that, because I think it could be cool. But anyway, back to Bad Batch. So yeah, I'm very curious what they're going to do with Ventress. So I don't, other than that, I don't really have a whole lot to say about the actual plot of this episode. It's very simple. It's just a series of challenges. There's some brief disagreements, some scuffles, some quarrels. Words are spoken. Is Omega a potential Jedi? Is she not? Still undetermined. So there's not really a whole lot to talk about here, given the actual story of the episode. What I want to talk about more is the animation / atmosphere in this episode. because holy cow, I think this is one of the best episodes of The Bad Batch in terms of that alone. Just this almost feels like, and because I know they've done this in the past where they've brought in, and I need to double check this, but I haven't. And I could just be wrong, and this may just be the skill of the animation team at this point. Because I know they did this on Clone Wars, but in Clone Wars a couple times they brought in live action directors to direct, episodes, and they would give their input on how they think shots should go, and what this scene should look like. They essentially helped storyboard and the whole thing and had input on lighting and stuff, because they did that with, I can't remember who they brought in, but they brought in a live action director during the Umbara arc, and that's why those episodes feel so intense, is that you had someone with a live action mindset directing animation. And sometimes that could be a hindrance, but in that case it was definitely a benefit. And I'm curious if that's the same case here, because there were so many shots and the way things were lit. I want to hear a whole breakdown on the lighting of the... I'm an animation nerd, if you can't tell. I want to hear a whole breakdown on the lighting in this episode from, is it Joel Aaron? I think he's their visual effects supervisor, or Killian Plunkett, or who's the animation supervisor. Whichever of those two, who I know are usually in charge of these things. I want to hear a whole breakdown on these, because there are so many shots where lighting and stuff is so important, and the whole storytelling of the scene is mirrored in the lighting. A key example is when the Bad Batch figure out that Ventress is who she is, that she's Asajj Ventress. She's this infamous separatist assassin that supposedly died during... I'm assuming that they're going to think, if she comes back, I'm sure there's going to be a thing about it. It's like, well, you died during the war. How the heck are you here? And then she'll probably give the backstories. I was brought back to life by witches, by the witches of Dathomir. So that scene where they're having their little standoff and they're telling her to leave, and Ventress has sent Omega off on the fool's errand, kind of, to get her out of there, because she knows a fight is about to go down. The Ventress being backlit by the sun, so most of her shots where you see her face, she is shrouded in darkness, while the Bad Batch are bathed in what little light remains, is such a really, 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 really cool touch. That really hammers in the point home behind the scene, where it's like a lot you can only really see of Ventress as her eyes, and barely even that, because her figure is so shrouded in darkness from being backlit by the sun, and it really gives her a foreboding nature that if you don't know who this character is, you kind of quickly understand who this character is, where it's like, oh, this was a bad guy, and she will do bad guy things. But just because she's not necessarily a bad guy anymore does not mean that she's no longer capable of doing those bad guy things. So I really loved those shots, making you, even us viewers and Star Wars fans that know who Ventress is very well, and who she probably is by this point in time, she's still not totally, you can't totally trust her. So just the way that those shots worked, and of course our heroes being the ones in the light still. It's very, it's very basic. I mean, this is basic visual storytelling, 101, but it's done so well and so beautifully. Some of those wide shots of her just walking through the cavern towards them, threatening them. It's like, oh my gosh, the animation is so stunning. It's like I so want. It's like, it's so funny. One of these days, I just maybe need to sit down and do a whole rambly talk about how much I love and admire George Lucas, faults and all, because he is so clearly a visionary. He is so clearly a visionary that knows what he wants, and it's like he's almost prophetic, where he sees things before they happen. Where a lot of people kind of scoff at the idea of, it's like he really thought it was a good idea to put the Clone Wars movie in theaters. And even I'm like, yeah, it really doesn't look great nowadays. But in 2007 or whatever, when they are getting the early cuts of that movie together before he makes the decision to greenlight this as a movie and to put in theaters, I kind of understand. It's like I don't think he was seeing what they had in the moment. I think he was seeing where that animation team could go, and this is where that animation team went. We go from the Clone Wars movie in 2008, which I think it's dated. I think it's aged a little bit, but I don't think I think a lot of, and there's a reason for this, because especially the first 20 minutes or so was animated after several episodes, after they'd done a lot of the first season of Clone Wars. But I think there's still some stuff in the Clone Wars movie that looks better than early season 1 of Clone Wars because of that. But I think he was definitely he definitely was seeing this in the future, where it's like, this is what this team is going to be capable of in the future, and I want people, as many people as possible, to see kind of this, maybe the start, the potential they have. And I can kind of, and there's shots in the Clone Wars movie where now I'm thinking back, it's like, man, look at what they tried. Like, it's a similar thing where they tried to do a similar thing and they executed as well as they could have, and now they're really doing what they tried to do then. And I'm thinking of the scene on Tatooine where Anakin and Ahsoka are taking Rata to Jabba's palace, and the twin suns are setting, and there's this very orange mood. It's this very orange lighting casting itself over the desert and the bantha skeleton that's lying there in the sand. And Anakin's saying that, okay, in order for us to survive, we have to split up. I know that sounds crazy, but we have to split up. You have to go one way, I have to go another, and hopefully we'll see each other on the other side. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I know you are capable. And that's kind of the conclusion of his character arc in that film, of learning to trust Ahsoka and realize that, she really can be his Padawan learner. So, and it's not necessarily a similar scene thematically, but visually it is a very similar scene. And so now we have this scene with Ventress and the Bad Batch, a whole, I don't know how many years later, 15 plus years later-ish, give or take. And it's like, oh my gosh, these visuals are gorgeous. Just the lighting, the textures on the cave, the fight scene where when she's fighting the Bad Batch and you see all the dust poof off their armor, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't give this animation team enough praise for just how amazing a job they're doing with this show. I'm gonna miss this show so much when it's done, because this is the third and final season, and I just hope they continue making stuff in this style, because I love Rebels. I like the Rebels art style. It is so completely, totally different from anything in Clone Wars, but I think it fits the type of show Rebels is. I'm not as big a fan of Resistance, but I don't think that's the art style's fault. If they had done a better job writing that show, I think I would have. It's like, I think the art style is a good choice for what they were wanting to do with that show. They just didn't completely achieve I think the potential that show had. And then working their way back to revisiting the Clone Wars style and really now honing in on what it could and can be and is. I just really hope that it's like this. It's just so funny thinking about back then. People going, oh, they just look like action figures, and it's like it's so stylized. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. It's a specific art style, and now we see what it is, and it's been honed. It's been hammered. It's like they know what it is now. They really know how to execute on it well. Where it's like the eyes aren't it's like, because I will say, it's like looking at some of those early character models and early maquettes that they made. It's like, yeah, it's very angular. It's very, very simple, large shapes. Like you look at the clone armor from like the first 3 seasons before you get the phase 2 armor in the following seasons, where it's like their wrist armor and elbow pad are all one piece that never come apart. When it's not really supposed to be that way. Whereas when they get their phase 2 armor, it's actually, their whole armor is now a full 4-piece set, where you have the gauntlet, you have the wrist, the wrist armor, and then the elbow pad, and then the upper bicep armor, and I suppose 5-piece, because then you have the shoulder pad. So it's like you actually have 5 individual pieces there for the clone animation model. So I really do hope that they continue making stuff, and we know that to a degree they will, because Tales of the Jedi is coming back. I'm very excited to see what they end up doing with that. But it's like another show. Like, some people are thinking that maybe Ventress is going to get a whole spinoff. I don't know if she's going to get a whole spinoff just focusing on her. I guess we'll find out. But it's I after this I'm really thinking that she is going to be included in Tales of the Jedi. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe like we get more Dooku episodes and she's in those, and then and so it's like 3 are focused on Dooku and she's in them, and then we get another 3 where it's like she's the star of them, and maybe it tells a little bit of the Dark Disciple story. I don't know, because I think some of those things would be cool to see visualized. Um, but yeah, another thing I like is that I like the contrast because we can go from a shot like that from the fight in the cave where the sun is so orange and it lights everything so beautifully, and then other parts of the episode are there this very dull gray. And I like that dull gray because I also like the name of the episode, The Harbinger, where it's like what does Harbinger mean? It's like things to come. I don't know the actual dictionary definition, but that's the idea behind it. It's like it's this. At least I'm pretty sure it is like it's this this idea of things to come, and maybe even a someone that brings a warning. And so this being the episode Ventress is in, and it's called The Harbinger. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen next after this episode. Is Omega going to be a Jedi? Is the Empire going to find them? The answer is yes, by the way, based on the trailer. Spoilers. What's going to happen? There's so much uncertain at this point in the show that I really like that they had this gray where it's like it wasn't bright and optimistic. It wasn't dark and foreboding. It was just anything could happen. It's just a medium gray. Also, I will say I am just a sucker for in general just for days like that actual in real life, just days like that where you walk out the front door and it's just gray. The sun's not beating down, but it's not freezing cold or raining, or it's just gray. There's like a nice little breeze. Like, okay, this is good. I like this. I like a nice. A lot of people call it dreary. I think that's too negative a word, but I just like a nice cloudy day like that. So seeing that represented so well on screen was also nice. And one thing I will say for the story is I did like kind of the use of the giant monster cliche that Bad Batch has going for it, and them kind of utilizing it really well here. Because of course, Riker made the joke a couple episodes ago about why is there always a big giant monster when the ice worm is attacking them, and then of course a couple episodes before that, you had the weird tarred tentacle monster or whatever. So, and then in seasons past, there's been other giant creatures and stuff they've had to fight off. So for there to be a giant monster in this episode, and for it to be resolved peacefully, where Ventress connects with it, I think that's such a cool character moment for her too. Where it's like especially for people that maybe have not written for people that have not read Dark Disciple and don't know where she is. Like maybe they're familiar with Ventress from earlier seasons of the Clone Wars, but they weren't aware of the book and everything. This is a really great. This is such a great reintroduction for her as a character, because she does display those tendencies that there's a sense of overconfidence, but cockiness of her, where in just this really sassy nature, it's like no cheating when she steals their weapons using the Force and stuff. But the ability to slow down and actually connect with another living being through the Force, I think that's a really, really big deal for her character to showcase that she can do that now. Whereas if you'd had a similar situation with her during the Clone Wars, she just would have used her lightsabers to eventually climb up on that thing and stab it in the eye and kill it. That would have been her solution to the problem. So I think that's a really, really great character moment for her and for the show, where it's like, okay, you bring in the big monster, but we're going to connect with the big monster and let it swim away peacefully, minus one tentacle, instead of having to do this death battle with it. I think that's a really great moment for the show. So I think I could just keep going with this episode, but I've already gone 25 minutes and I feel like I could go for another 40, but I'm kind of running out of time of where I need to be going to bed because I'm recording this pretty late. So this is a phenomenal episode. That is just such a really great episode. Not so much for like the actual plot beat by beat, but for the little character moments, the animation, the way the animation aided the storytelling, what this could mean for certain characters in the future. I think this is a really, really great episode, and I'm sad that there's only 6 left because that means we're that much closer to this show being over, and I don't want that. Because I really love Clone Wars, I really love clones, I really love Bad Batch. This has just all been so good for me. So, anyway, so yeah, that'll be it for this review. So, thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below. And I'll see you guys next time for 2 new episodes of the Bad Batch. And yeah, so that'll be fun. So see you guys then. Thank you for watching and goodbye.